The iron gates of the Black Ridge Citadel didn't creak. They groaned like a dying god. Outside, the blizzard howled, a white wall of ice and teeth, but inside the great hall, the air was thick with the scent of wet fur, expensive leather, and the metallic tang of unsheathed steel. Evelyn Salt, her boots worn to the soles, her cloak a patchwork of desperate prayers, stepped onto the obsidian floor. Her fingers were numb, but they clutched a single tarnished silver denarius. It was the last of her family's legacy, the final coin from a coffer that had once fed a village. Around her, the Lycan nobility lurked in the shadows of the pillars, their eyes glowing like embers in the dark. They weren't men. They were predators wrapped in silk, waiting for the girl with the shaking hands to trip so they could tear the life from her throat. At the far end of the hall, perched on a throne carved from the ribcage of a mountain giant, sat Logan Howlett, the Lycan King. He didn't wear a crown, he wore scars. His chest was bare despite the mountain chill, mapped with the history of 1,000 borders won in blood. He watched her approach with a boredom that was more terrifying than rage. "You spent your last breath to walk through my doors." Logan's voice vibrated through the floorboards, a low-frequency growl that made Evelyn's teeth ache. "And you spend your last coin to ask for my ear. Fig human. Before the silence becomes your grave. Before we descend further into this den of wolves and ancient blood, hello to every one of you joining us today. Whether you are watching from a quiet room in Stockholm, a busy street in Lagos, or a cozy corner in Sydney, I am so deeply moved that you've chosen to spend this time with me. How are you all doing? I truly hope your day is filled with the kind of strength our protagonist is about to show. If you haven't yet, would you please consider subscribing to the channel? We are building a community of story lovers here, and every single one of you makes this hearth burn brighter. Evelyn didn't kneel. She couldn't. If she went to her knees now, she knew she would never find the strength to stand again. She held the coin high, the silver catching the flickering torchlight. "My family is being hunted by the Silverfang Syndicate," she said, her voice small but sharp as a needle. "By dawn, my brothers will be red snow and my sisters will be trophies. I don't ask for gold. I don't ask for a place in your court. I ask for your claws, King Logan. Save them and my life is yours to spend as you see fit." A ripple of cruel laughter erupted from the shadows. A high-ranking alpha stepped forward, his lip curled. "A human girl bartering her soul for a peasant's pack? Kill her, my king. It's an insult to the moon that she even breathes our air." Logan Howlett didn't laugh. He leaned forward, his nostrils flaring. He didn't smell the fear she was trying to hide. He smelled something else. Something buried beneath the scent of wood smoke and poverty. It was a scent from a time before the Great Divide. A scent of crushed jasmine and lunar nectar. It was a scent that shouldn't exist in a human. He stood up, his massive frame casting a shadow that swallowed the entire hall. The laughter died instantly. He descended the steps, his amber eyes locked onto hers, searching for the moment she would break. "You offer me your life," Logan whispered, leaning down until his jagged breath stirred her hair. "But do you even know what your life is worth?" He reached out, his clawed finger tilting her chin up. As their skin met, a shockwave of gold light pulsed behind Evelyn's eyelids. The great hall vanished for a split second, replaced by a vision of a blood-red moon hanging over a burning forest. The king pulled back, his expression unreadable, his heart thundering against his ribs like a trapped beast. He turned to his shocked court, his voice echoing with an authority that brooked no rebellion. "The girl stays. The Silverfangs die tonight. And if any of you touches her, I will feed your heart to the crows." Evelyn felt the world tilt. She had won her plea, but as the king looked back at her with a hunger that wasn't for flesh, she realized the price of his yes might be more than she was prepared to pay. What had he sensed in her? And why did the King of Wolves look at a common girl as if she were a long-lost goddess? The guest chambers of the Black Ridge Citadel were less like a bedroom and more like a gilded cage carved into the very marrow of the mountain. Evelyn Salt stood by the window, her breath fogging the reinforced glass. Below, she watched a dark tide of fur and steel, Logan's elite vanguard, thundering out of the gates. They moved with a predatory grace that turned the blizzard into their ally. Somewhere out there in the dying light of the valley, her family was huddled in a cellar, praying for a miracle. She didn't realize she was shaking until a heavy, fur-lined cloak was draped over her shoulders. The scent of cedar and old lightning flooded her senses. They will be brought back alive, a voice rumbled. Evelyn spun around. Logan Howlett stood in the doorway, his presence filling the room until the high ceilings felt cramped. He had traded his throne room ferocity for a quiet, observant intensity. He watched her like a scholar examining a scroll written in a dead language. "Why?" Evelyn asked, her voice cracking. "I am a girl with a tarnished coin and a death wish. Your court thinks you've gone mad. Your alphas are already whispering of a coup because you've prioritized a human over the pack's isolation." Logan stepped closer, his boots silent on the stone. "My alphas think with their teeth, Evelyn. I think with my blood." He reached out not to touch her but to trace the air near her throat. "There is a hum in your veins. A frequency. Most humans smell of fear and sweat. You smell of the high moon. It is a scent that hasn't been recorded in our histories for 300 years. Evelyn pulled the cloak tighter. Her deepest fear wasn't the wolves outside. It was the emptiness inside. For years she had felt like a stranger in her own skin. A girl who saw glimpses of a silver-white forest in her dreams and heard voices in the wind that no one else could hear. She had spent her life trying to be small, to be ordinary, to be the daughter her parents needed. But the king was looking at her as if she were a revolution. "I just want them safe, Logan," she whispered. "That's my only desire. To see my sisters grow up without looking over their shoulders. To see my father's hands stop shaking." "And what of your own safety?" Logan asked, his amber eyes darkening. "You've traded your freedom for theirs. You are under my protection now, which means you belong to the Citadel. You will eat at my table, sleep in my halls, and answer to no one but me. The court will hate you for it. They will see you as a pet or worse, a weakness." "I've been a nobody my whole life," Evelyn said, meeting his gaze with a sudden, fierce spark. "Hate is a step up from being ignored." A low, appreciative vibration started in Logan's chest. It wasn't a growl. It was a purr of recognition. He saw the steel in her, the raw, unpolished courage that mirrored his own. He had spent a century leading through fear and strength, but in this fragile human woman he saw a different kind of power. The door burst open and Caleb Ripper, the king's beta and oldest friend, marched in. Caleb was a man of scars and cynical smiles, his eyes perpetually scanning for threats. "The Silverfangs are retreating to the Iron Ravine," Caleb reported, casting a wary, distrustful look at Evelyn. "But Logan, we found something. Their leader, Valerius, isn't just hunting her family for sport. He's looking for the key. He thinks the girl is the map." Logan's jaw tightened. "Let him think what he wants. He'll find nothing but a shallow grave." "The council is demanding an audience," Caleb pushed, his voice dropping to a warning. "They want to know why a human girl is wearing the king's own cloak. They're calling her a siren, Logan. They think she's bewitched you." Logan turned back to Evelyn. For a second the king's mask slipped and she saw the weight of his crown, the loneliness of a man who had to be a monster to keep his people safe. "Let them talk," Logan said. "Evelyn, you will come to the great hall for the evening feast. You will sit at my right hand. Let them see that the siren doesn't need a song to command the king's respect." Before we see Evelyn face the gauntlet of the Lycan Council, I have to ask, have you ever felt like you were in a place where you didn't belong, but you had to stand tall anyway? How did you find your voice? Let me know in the comments below. And if you're rooting for Evelyn to show those wolves what a human is made of, hit that subscribe button right now. As Caleb led Logan away, Evelyn caught her reflection in a silver mirror. For the first time she didn't see a desperate beggar. She saw a woman standing in the center of a storm, and for some reason she wasn't afraid of the lightning anymore. The Great Hall during the Feast of the First Thaw was not a place of celebration. It was a theater of war. Long trestle tables groaned under the weight of roasted elk and dark fermented ale. Hundreds of Lycan warriors, their eyes glowing in the low light, tore at meat with a hunger that was barely contained by their human forms. When Evelyn Salt entered, walking half a step behind Logan Howlett, the roar of the room didn't just fade, it vanished. The silence was heavy, pressurized like the air before a lightning strike. "Sit," Logan commanded, his voice echoing off the vaulted stone. He pulled out the heavy oak chair to his immediate right, the seat traditionally reserved for the Luna, the queen of the pack. A low, collective growl vibrated through the hall. Valerius Vane, the representative of the northern clans and a man whose ambition was as sharp as his filed teeth, stood up. He didn't look at Evelyn, he looked directly at Logan. "High King," Valerius purred, his voice dripping with false deference. "We celebrate the safety of the borders, yes. But we do not celebrate the presence of a scavenger at the high table. You sent our finest hunters to save a human brood. You waste our blood on a girl who has nothing to offer but a copper coin and a pretty face." Logan's hand tightened around the stem of his silver chalice until the metal began to deform. "She offered her life, Valerius. Which is more than I can say for those who hide in the north while the Silverfangs raid our supply lines. She is a distraction." Valerius barked, his eyes finally snapping to Evelyn. "She is a weakness you cannot afford. If she is so valuable, let her prove it. Let her face the trial of the moon. If the goddess accepts her, she stays. If not..." He trailed off, a cruel smile touching his lips. "The wolves must eat." Evelyn felt the blood drain from her face. The trial of the moon was a death sentence for humans. A night spent in the Whispering Woods, where the ancient spirits of the pack tested the soul. No one without Lycan blood had ever returned. "She is a guest, not a petitioner for the pack," Logan growled, his aura flaring. The shadows in the room seemed to lengthen, bending toward him as his inner beast pushed against the surface. "I'll do it." The words were quiet, but in that silent hall, they hit like a thunderclap. Logan turned to Evelyn, his eyes wide with a mixture of fury and disbelief. "Evelyn, no," he whispered, his hand catching her wrist under the table. His skin was burning hot. "You don't know what you're saying. The woods, they aren't just trees. They are mirror. They will show you things that will break your mind." "They're already broken, Logan," Evelyn said, her voice gaining strength. She looked at Valerius, then at the sea of hostile faces. "You want to know why I'm here? You want to know if I'm a siren? I'll show you. I won't have my family's safety bought with your pity. I'll buy it with my own blood." Valerius laughed, a jagged, triumphant sound. "Tonight then. When the moon hits the zenith." The edge of the Whispering Woods felt like the boundary of another world. The trees were bone white, their branches twisted into skeletal fingers that clawed at the silver sky. Logan stood with Evelyn at the tree lean, away from the prying eyes of the court. "Take this," Logan said, pressing a small black stone into her palm. It was warm, vibrating with a dull, rhythmic thrum. "It's a piece of the Heartstone. If the darkness gets too thick, focus on the heat. I will be at the gate. I won't let them close it until you return." "And if I don't?" Evelyn asked. Logan stepped closer, his shadow falling over her like a protective shroud. For a moment the king vanished and she saw only the man who was terrified for her. "Then the Silverfangs will be the least of this kingdom's worries. Because I will burn these woods to the ground to find you." He reached out, his thumb brushing her cheek. The touch sparked that same golden light in her mind. But this time she saw more. She saw a woman with hair like spun starlight standing beside a great black wolf. They weren't fighting. They were reigning. "Go," Logan whispered, his voice thick with an emotion he couldn't name. Evelyn turned and stepped into the white trees. The silence of the forest swallowed her instantly. But as she walked deeper, the scent of jasmine and lunar nectar, the scent Logan had noticed, began to pour from her skin, lighting the path like a phantom lantern. Suddenly the ground shook. From the shadows emerged not a wolf, but a creature of shadow and silver light, its eyes the color of the ancient moon. It didn't growl. It bowed. "The key has returned," a voice whispered in the wind. "Before we find out what the forest reveals to Evelyn about her true lineage, I have to ask, have you ever had to prove yourself to a group of people who had already decided you weren't enough? How did you keep your head held high? Drop a comment below. And if you're dying to know the secret Evelyn is carrying, make sure you're subscribed for part 4. The trial of the moon had begun, but it wasn't Evelyn who was being tested. It was the kingdom itself. The Whispering Woods didn't just contain shadows. They contained memories. Evelyn's salt moved through the silver-white trees, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The further she walked, the more the air seemed to shimmer with a strange, bioluminescent fog. The black heartstone in her palm glowed with a heat that was almost painful, pulsing in sync with her own blood. Behind her, the high stone walls of the citadel loomed like a tomb. But ahead, the forest opened into a clearing where the moonlight pooled like liquid mercury. "Evelyn." The voice didn't come from the wind. It came from a figure stepping out from behind a massive ancient oak. It was a woman, her features a mirror of Evelyn's own, but her eyes were twin moons of pure silver. She wore a gown of woven starlight that seemed to flow like water. "Mother," Evelyn whispered, the word catching in her throat. Her mother had died 10 years ago in a fever that had ravaged their village, or so she had been told. "The blood does not lie, my starlight," the apparition said, her voice a melody of bells and sorrow. "You were never meant for the dirt of the valley. You were the seed planted in the dark to wait for the king of the mountain." Before Evelyn could reach out, the vision fractured. The silver woman dissolved into a swarm of white moths, and the ground beneath Evelyn's feet began to groan. From the shadows of the north, a pack of wolves, not Logan's men but the feral red-eyed scouts of the Silverfang Syndicate, emerged. They had bypassed the king's perimeter, led by a traitor who knew the forest's hidden veins. "The king's little pet is lost," a voice sneered. Valerius Vane stepped into the clearing, his eyes glowing with a treacherous hunger. "He wasn't supposed to be here. The trial was meant to be sacred, unobserved. Logan thinks you're a prophecy. I think you're a paycheck. The High Council of the Southern Realms will pay a mountain of gold for the last descendant of the lunar priests." Evelyn backed away, her heels catching on a protruding root. "The king will kill you for this, Valerius." "The king won't know," Valerius laughed, shifting partially into his Lycan form, his claws lengthening, his jaw distending into a muzzle of bone and fur. "The woods claim many souls. You'll just be another story told to frighten children." He lunged. Back at the citadel, Logan Howlett was pacing the battlements, his claws gouging deep furrows into the parapet. His inner wolf was howling, a primal scream of warning that clawed at the back of his throat. Something was wrong. The air tasted of ozone and betrayal. "Logan, wait!" Caleb Ripper shouted, sprinting up the stairs. The north gate was left unmanned. "Valerius is gone. And 3 of the High Council members have vanished from their quarters." Logan didn't wait for the rest. He didn't shift into a wolf. He simply leapt from the 60-foot wall, hitting the snowy ground with a bone-jarring thud and sprinting toward the whispering woods. He wasn't a king in that moment. He was a force of nature, a hurricane of fur and fury tearing through the underbrush. He burst into the clearing just as Valerius's claws were inches from Evelyn's throat. The collision was seismic. Logan slammed into Valerius, the 2 Lycan's becoming a blur of gray and black fur, teeth snapping, blood spraying across the white snow. It wasn't a duel, it was a slaughter. Logan fought with a desperation he had never known, his body taking hits that would have felled an alpha, his only focus on the woman standing frozen in the center of the clearing. "Get away from her!" Logan roared, his voice a literal shockwave that sent the Silverfang scouts scrambling. He pinned Valerius to the ground, his teeth inches from the traitor's throat. But as he prepared to deliver the final strike, the ground beneath Evelyn began to glow with an ethereal, blinding light. The black heartstone in her hand shattered, and the shards didn't fall. They floated, orbiting her like tiny stars. The scent of jasmine and lunar nectar exploded, so potent it brought every Lycan in the clearing to their knees. Even Logan paused, his beast mesmerized by the raw, ancient power radiating from the human girl. Evelyn's hair, once dark as mahogany, began to turn a brilliant, shimmering white at the tips. Her eyes, usually the color of earth, flashed with a silver brilliance that matched the moon above. "The trial is over," Evelyn said, her voice no longer hers alone, but layered with the echoes of 1,000 ancestors. "The king has protected the priestess. Now the priestess shall protect the king." A pillar of silver fire erupted from the earth, consuming the Silverfang scouts in a light that didn't burn but erased. Valerius screamed as the light touched him, his form reverting to a broken, shivering human before he vanished into the shadows of the trees. Silence returned to the woods, but it was a different kind of silence. It was the silence of a world that had just been reshaped. Logan shifted back to his human form, naked and bleeding in the snow, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and terror. He looked at Evelyn. No, he looked at the lunar bride of prophecy, and for the first time in his life the king of wolves felt the urge to kneel. "Evelyn," he whispered, his voice trembling. The light faded and Evelyn collapsed. Logan caught her before she hit the frozen ground, pulling her against his massive, scarred chest. She was cold, her skin pale, but she was alive. "I saw her, Logan," she murmured, her eyes fluttering shut. I saw the moon. It's not a rock in the sky. It's a heart. And it's beating inside me. Before we see how the High Council reacts to a human becoming the most powerful being in the kingdom, I have to ask. Have you ever had a moment where a hidden part of yourself finally came to the surface and changed everything? It's a terrifying and beautiful thing. Drop a comment and tell me what you think of Evelyn's transformation. And if you want to see if Logan can protect her from the enemies she's just made, hit that subscribe button. Logan carried her back to the Citadel, but he didn't use the back entrance. He walked through the main gates, through the center of the Great Hall, and past the stunned, silent nobles. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. The silver streak in her hair told the only story that mattered. The solar of the Black Ridge Citadel was usually a place of quiet strategy, but today the air was heavy with the scent of sage and burning cedar. Evelyn Salt lay on a bed of white furs, the silver streak in her hair shimmering like a fallen star against the dark pillows. She wasn't sleeping. She was drifting in a sea of memories that didn't belong to her. Logan Howlett sat by her side, his large scarred hand hovering just an inch above her brow. He looked haunted. The victory in the woods had come at a price. The veil between the human world and the Lycan mythos had been torn wide open. She's waking, Caleb Ripper whispered from the doorway. He looked at Evelyn with a new kind of fear, the fear a man has for a storm he cannot weather. Evelyn's eyes snapped open. They weren't brown anymore. They were a piercing, translucent violet, the color of the sky just before the moon rises. She sat up with a fluid grace that was entirely unhuman, her gaze locking onto Logan. It wasn't a request, Logan, she said, her voice sounding like two people speaking at once. The girl who spent her last coin and something much older. My family. They weren't just farmers. They were the keepers. My father didn't flee the northern clans because of a debt. He fled because he was hiding the lunar heart. Logan's jaw tightened. The heart is a myth, Evelyn. A bedtime story told to cubs to make them respect the moon. Is it? Evelyn reached out and touched his chest right over his heart. A pulse of silver light rippled between them, and for a second Logan saw what she saw. A hidden chamber beneath the citadel, sealed with blood and ancient stone, containing a pulsing crystalline core that hummed with the frequency of the tides. In the darkness of the secret tunnel, Evelyn didn't cry. She didn't tremble. She followed the silver light in her veins, heading toward the heart of the storm. The iron bridge spanned the Lycan King was never meant to be a conqueror, Evelyn continued, her fingers trembling against his skin. He was meant to be the guardian. And the priestess, she was the key. Without the heart, the Lycan race is dying, Logan. That's why the births are failing. That's why the winters are getting longer. You're fading and you didn't even know it. The revelation hit Logan like a physical blow. He stood up, pacing the small room, his claws instinctively extending and retracting. He looked at Caleb, whose face had gone ashen. If the council finds out the heart is real, and that she is the only one who can unlock it, they won't just want her as a guest, Caleb said, his voice urgent. They'll want her as a battery. They'll chain her to that stone to feed the pack's power. I will kill anyone who tries, Logan roared, the stone walls vibrating with his fury. You can't kill a prophecy, Logan, Evelyn said softly. She stood up, the white furs sliding to the floor. But there's more. The Silverfangs, they aren't just a rival clan. Their leader, Valerius's master, is someone from your own bloodline. Someone who knows exactly what the heart is worth. Before Logan could respond, a horn blasted from the ramparts. A long, mournful note that signaled a parley. Logan strode to the window. In the valley below, a massive army had gathered. They didn't fly the jagged banners of the Silverfangs. They flew the royal blue and silver of the High Lycan Guard, the king's own elite soldiers from the southern capital. Leading them was a man on a black stallion, his armor polished to a mirror finish. "My brother," Logan whispered, his voice filled with a sudden, sharp betrayal. Silas Howlett, the prince who had been exiled a decade ago for experimenting with dark lunar magic, had returned. Silas looked up at the citadel, his voice amplified by a sorcerous charm. "Logan, brother, I hear you found a treasure that belongs to all of us. Hand over the girl and I will let the citadel stand. Refuse, and I will take the heart from her cold, dead chest." The stakes had shifted. It was no longer a matter of protecting a human family or a girl's courage. The very survival of the Lycan race hung in the balance, and the woman Logan had begun to love was the only thing standing between his brother and a dark, eternal winter. Before we see how Logan chooses between his kingdom and the woman who changed his life, I have to ask. If you held the key to saving your people but it meant putting someone you loved in danger, what would you do? The moral dilemma is real. Drop a comment and let me know your thoughts. And if you're ready for the darkest hour of our story, hit that subscribe button now. Logan turned to Evelyn. The tension between them was electric, a mix of ancient destiny and raw human passion. He didn't see a priestess. He saw the woman who had spent her last coin on hope. "I'm not handing you over," Logan said, his voice a vow. "Even if I have to watch this kingdom burn." The sun didn't rise over the Black Ridge Citadel. It was smothered by a sky the color of a bruised plum. Freezing rain turned the mountain paths into treacherous ribbons of ice, and the air hummed with the discordant magic of Silas Howlett's approaching host. Inside the royal solar, the warmth of the hearth felt like a cruel joke. Evelyn Salt stood by the heavy oak table, staring at a map of the kingdom that felt like a death warrant. Beside her, Logan Howlett was a statue of suppressed violence, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the stone mantle. "He has the Southern Alphas," Caleb Ripper reported, his voice hollow. "They've been promised a cure for the fading. They don't care about prophecy or priestesses, Logan. They care about surviving the next winter. They see Evelyn as a vessel, a battery to be drained." "I am not a battery," Evelyn said, her voice quiet but ringing with a new, crystalline authority. The violet in her eyes pulsed with every heartbeat. "But Silas doesn't want to cure the fading. He wants to control it. If he gets the lunar heart, he won't just save the Lycan's. He'll turn us into an army of shadows that never needs to sleep, never needs to hunt, and never needs to feel." The door burst open. It wasn't a soldier who entered but Evelyn's younger sister, Mia. She was pale, her dress torn, escorted by two of Logan's guards. "Evelyn," Mia sobbed, lunging into her sister's arms. "The village, they came back. The men with the blue banners. They took father. They said if the king doesn't bring the silver girl to the Iron Bridge by midnight, they'll... Evelyn squeezed her eyes shut, pulling her sister close. The Silver Fong threat had been a mere distraction. The real monster had been waiting in the wings, using her family as leverage for a game that spanned centuries. Logan turned, his eyes glowing a predatory amber. "He's forcing my hand. He knows I won't sacrifice my people, but he also knows I won't give him you." "Then you have to choose, Logan," Evelyn whispered, stepping away from her sister. "The king of the mountain or the man who saved a beggar. You can't be both tonight." The silence that followed was broken by the sound of a massive trebuchet firing from the valley below. A boulder, enchanted with flickering blue flame, smashed into the west watchtower. The vibration shook the very foundations of the citadel, knocking tapestries from the walls and sending a cloud of ancient dust billowing through the halls. "They're breaching the outer ring," a guard screamed from the corridor. Logan grabbed his heavy broadsword, the blackened steel singing as it left the scabbard. He looked at Evelyn, really looked at her, and for the first time she saw tears in the eyes of the wolf. "I can't lose you," he rasped. "Not after I just found you." "You're not losing me," Evelyn said, reaching out to touch his scarred cheek. "But you have to lead your pack. Go to the walls. I'll go to the bridge." "No," Logan roared. "I will not trade your life for my crown." "I'm not trading anything," Evelyn said, her voice dropping to a haunting whisper. "I'm fulfilling the bargain. I spent my last coin for your help, Logan. Now I'm spending my life to save yours." Before he could stop her, Evelyn pressed her palm to the stone wall. The ancient runes carved into the citadel responded to her touch, glowing with a brilliant silver light. A hidden door, a passage known only to the priestesses of old, groaned open behind her. "Caleb, lock him in if you have to," Evelyn commanded. "Protect the king." "Evelyn, wait." Logan lunged, but the stone door slid shut with the finality of a mountain closing its eyes. She was gone. Logan threw himself against the stone, his claws shredding the rock, his howls echoing through the empty solar. Outside, the screams of the dying and the roar of the siege engines filled the air. The king was trapped in his own castle, his heart walking toward a trap and his people burning in the snow. It was the darkest hour the Black Ridge had ever seen. The prophecy seemed to be a curse, the silver light a funeral shroud. Before we see if Evelyn can face Silas alone at the Iron Bridge, I have to ask, have you ever had to let someone you love walk into danger because it was the only way to save everyone else? The pain of being the one left behind is unbearable. Drop a comment and tell me what you think of Evelyn's sacrifice. And if you're holding your breath for the final showdown, hit that subscribe button. Chasm of wailing, a jagged tear in the earth where the wind sounded like 1,000 dying wolves. Evelyn Salt stood at the center of the span, her white hair whipping around her face like a halo of frost. Opposite her, encased in armor that drank the moonlight, stood Silas Howlett. He held a jagged obsidian dagger to the throat of a kneeling, broken man, Evelyn's father. The girl with the last coin, Silas mocked, his voice a distorted rasp behind his visor. You look more like a ghost than a savior, Evelyn. Give me the heart and your father lives. Refuse, and I'll paint this bridge with his blood before I take it from your corpse anyway. Evelyn felt the cold bite of the mountain air, but inside, a different kind of heat was blooming. It wasn't the frantic fire of a human in terror. It was the slow, rhythmic pulse of the mountain itself. The black heartstone shards in her veins weren't just jewelry. They were a compass. You can't take what doesn't belong to you, Silas, Evelyn said. Her voice didn't shake. It resonated, causing the very stones of the bridge to hum in a low, subsonic frequency. The heart isn't a stone. It's a choice. And it will never choose a man who uses his own family as a shield. Suddenly, the ground beneath the bridge didn't just shake. It roared. From the treeline of the Black Ridge, a shadow emerged that was larger than any wolf Silas's men had ever seen. It wasn't a man shifting into a beast. It was a beast that had reclaimed its divinity. Logan Howlett hadn't just broken through the stone door of the solar. He had torn through the ancient wards of the citadel. His fur was no longer black. It was tipped with the same silver luminescence as Evelyn's hair. He didn't run toward the bridge, he descended like an avalanche. Silas. Logan's roar caused the southern alphas to recoil, their own inner wolves whimpering in the presence of a true high king. You wanted the heart. You forgot that the heart only beats for the one who protects the pack. As Logan crashed into Silas's front lines, Evelyn closed her eyes. She reached deep into the core of her being, past the fear, past the memories of the village, to the ancient wellspring of the lunar priests. She didn't pray to the moon, she commanded it. Return to the root, Evelyn whispered. A blinding pillar of silver light erupted from the center of the bridge, connecting the earth to the sky. The light didn't burn the soldiers. It stripped away the dark sorcery Silas had used to bind them. One by one, the southern alphas dropped their weapons, their eyes clearing of the red haze of Silas's influence. They looked at the girl in the light, and then at the king in the silver fur, and they realized they had been fighting for a shadow against the sun. Silas screamed, his obsidian dagger shattering into dust. He lunged for Evelyn, but he was no longer fighting a human. He was fighting the moon itself. Before we see the final clash between the brothers and the ultimate fate of the lunar heart, I have to ask, have you ever reached a point where you realized that your greatest strength wasn't something you had but something you were? It's the moment the underdog finally bites back. Let me know in the comments if you saw this power-up coming. And if you're ready for the climactic resolution, hit that subscribe button now. Evelyn reached out and caught Silas's wrist. As her skin touched his armor, the silver light flowed into him, not as a weapon but as a mirror. Silas saw the monster he had become, and for the first time in a decade, the Prince of Shadows felt the cold sting of regret. The bridge groaned. The chasm yawned. And the King of the Mountain leaped. Part 8. Climactic Resolution. The leap was a blur of silver and shadow. Logan Howlett didn't strike like a man, he fell like a mountain. His massive silver-furred form collided with Silas Howlett just as the iron bridge began to groan under the sheer pressure of the lunar energy Evelyn was channeling. The shockwave of their impact sent a ripple through the stone, cracking the ancient mortar. Silas, stripped of his dark sorcery but still possessed by a desperate, jagged rage, drew a hidden blade of cold iron, the only substance capable of piercing a high king's hide. If I cannot rule the heart, I will bury it. Silas screamed, lunging not at his brother but at Evelyn. But Evelyn didn't flinch. She stood in the center of the silver pillar, her hair glowing like a supernova. She reached out, her fingers brushing the air, and the black heartstone shards orbiting her suddenly surged forward. They didn't strike Silas. They wove a cage of light around him, freezing him in midair. You speak of burying hearts, Silas, Evelyn said, her voice echoing with the depth of the mountain. But you forgot that a heart only beats when it is given, not taken. Logan, shifting back into his human form, his skin etched with glowing silver runes, stepped toward his brother. He didn't look at the blade in Silas's hand. He looked at the man he had once called brother. The fading wasn't a curse from the moon, Silas, Logan said, his voice thick with a weary grief. It was a reflection of us. We became greedy. We became cold. We turned our backs on the people we were meant to protect. Evelyn didn't bring the light back, she reminded us that we are the light. Logan reached into the cage of light and took the iron blade from Silas's trembling hand. He didn't use it. He dropped it into the chasm of wailing, watching it vanish into the mist. Go, Logan commanded. The south is no longer yours and the north will never have you. Live with the silence you tried to create. Evelyn released the pressure. The silver cage dissolved and Silas fell to the deck of the bridge, broken not in body but in spirit. He looked at the southern alphas, the men who had once followed him, and saw only pity in their eyes. He turned and vanished into the freezing rain of the ravine, a ghost of a prince seeking a shadow to hide in. Evelyn's father, freed from his bonds, scrambled toward his daughter. Evelyn, what have you become? Evelyn smiled, the violet in her eyes softening back to the warm mahogany of the girl who had spent her last coin. The silver fire receded, pulling back into her skin, leaving only the single streak of starlight in her hair. I'm still your daughter, father, she whispered, embracing him. But the king had a debt to pay. And I think he's paid it in full. Logan approached them, his presence still heavy with the remnants of the High King's power. He looked at the bridge, at the reunited family, and then at the thousands of Lycan's, both north and south, who were now kneeling in the snow. They weren't kneeling to a conqueror. They were kneeling to a new dawn. The key had been turned. The heart was beating again. And as the clouds finally parted, revealing a moon so bright it turned the night into day, the kingdom realized that the greatest power wasn't found in blood or steel. It was found in the courage of a woman who had nothing left to lose and the honor of a king who had everything to give. Before we reach the final emotional conclusion of this epic journey, I have to ask, was there a moment you thought Logan wouldn't make it? Or that Evelyn would have to sacrifice her humanity entirely? Drop a comment below. And if you want to see how this new kingdom begins its first day of peace, hit that subscribe button for part 9. Logan took Evelyn's hand. The silver runes on his skin hummed in harmony with the starlight in her hair. They weren't just a king and a priestess anymore. They were the bridge between two worlds. The first sunrise of the new era didn't just break over the mountains. It seemed to dissolve them in a wash of pale gold and lavender. The Black Ridge Citadel, once a fortress of jagged shadows and cold stone, now stood as a beacon. The ice that had choked the lower valleys for a decade was beginning to weep, sending thousands of tiny musical streams cascading down the cliffs to feed the parched earth below. Evelyn Salt stood on the high balcony of the Royal Solar, the same place where she had once looked out in terror. She wore a simple gown of white wool, the silver streak in her hair braided with sprigs of mountain jasmine. Behind her, the room was filled with the quiet domestic sounds of a family reborn. Her father was carving a wooden wolf for her younger sisters, his hands steady and tanned by the return of the sun. They're calling it the year of the silver thaw, a voice rumbled behind her. Logan Howlett stepped onto the balcony. He wasn't wearing his heavy battle leathers or his scarred armor. He wore a simple tunic, his massive frame relaxed, his amber eyes no longer burning with the restless hunger of a predator. He looked at Evelyn not as a king looks at a priestess, but as a man looks at the woman who saved his soul. And what do the southern alphas call it? Evelyn asked, a playful spark returning to her violet eyes. They call it a miracle, Logan said, leaning against the stone railing beside her. The fading has stopped. The first cubs were born in the southern capital last night, strong, healthy, and loud. They're saying the lunar heart hasn't just returned to the mountain, it's returned to the people. He reached into the pocket of his tunic and pulled out a small velvet pouch. He pressed it into Evelyn's hand. She opened it to find a single polished silver coin, the very one she had spent to gain her audience. It had been cleaned of its tarnish, glowing with a faint, internal light. I can't take this back, Logan, she whispered. A bargain is a bargain. It's not a refund, Evelyn. Logan said, his voice dropping to a low, intimate vibration. It's a reminder that even when you have nothing, you have the power to change the world. I want you to keep it. As the first counselor of the Black Ridge. And, as the woman I intend to walk beside for the rest of my days. The silence that followed wasn't heavy or pressurized. It was the silence of a forest at peace. Evelyn looked at the coin, then at the man who had traded his crown of fear for a crown of light. She realized that the prophecy wasn't about a bride or a heart or a stone. It was about the moment two broken things decided to become whole together. I think I can manage that, Evelyn said, a soft smile touching her lips. But you should know, King Logan, I'm still a very expensive advisor. My next request might cost you more than a coin. Name it, Logan said, his hand covering hers on the railing. A garden, she said, looking out at the thawing valley. A garden where the children of the North and South can play without ever knowing what a silverfong is. A place where the only thing we hunt is the sunset. Logan laughed, the sound echoing off the peaks, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy. Consider it done. As the people below began to gather in the courtyard, their voices rising in a song of gratitude that reached the very clouds, the Lycan King and the lunar priestess stood together. The kingdom had been changed forever, not by blood or steel, but by the reckless courage of a girl who dared to ask for a miracle and the honor of a king who was brave enough to say yes. Before we close the gates on the Black Ridge Citadel, I want to thank you all for embarking on this 40-minute emotional journey with me. This story of Evelyn and Logan reminds us that even in our darkest moments, hope is the only currency that never loses its value. If you loved this conclusion, please leave a comment. I'd love to know what you think happens next for our duo. And if you want to be the first to hear our next epic tale, make sure you've hit that subscribe button and turned on notifications. The moon had set but the light remained. And for Evelyn Salt, the girl with the last coin, the Rayal story was only just beginning.